Hello and welcome back to Miss McCay's Art Corner, where I use books to teach about art. Today I'd like to talk about scientific illustrators. They're the people, they're just like a regular illustrator for like a children's book, but what they do is instead of making illustrations for children's books, they make the realistic illustrations that you find in textbooks. So let's take for instance, as I scoot up a little bit. Here's a book I used in college to learn how to draw a human figure. So when you're an art teacher, you have to learn how to draw like a face or the arm or the bends or people in motion. And so you had to use a textbook. And here's a picture of the textbook. So let me straighten it up a little. There you go. It's about the ligaments and the bones of how your arm works so that if I wanted to draw a cheerleader, I didn't draw her funny looking or bent looking. I drew her correctly. And a lot of times you have to learn about bone structure. So a scientific illustrator drew the pictures in this book and then labeled 1, 2, 3, the different things you need to talk about on the picture. So, in order to be a scientific illustrator, you have to actually look at real things. So, in my classroom, I teach about scientific illustration as a career in art and practice for drawing exact pictures by using real things such as my seashell collection. Now, my seashell collection was collected by me just walking on the beach over the last several years, particularly on the Florida coast, but can be anywhere on the coastline. So let's talk about that for a second. So if you look right here, this is a picture of Mississippi, the state we live in. You see it? And if you look, the green is our entire state. And if you look down here where the blue is, that's the Gulf of Mexico. And you see those little dots, dot, 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 dot along the blue? Those little dots are barrier islands that are on our coast. All right, so if you see the barrier islands, it does exactly what their title says. They are a barrier to protect the green land. So not really big waves get to wash up very often because those barrier islands protect our coast. Well, in the same way, a lot of times shells don't get washed up to our coast like you see in other states. So that's why I travel over here to Alabama or Florida, because you can actually go on those barrier islands with your car, like drive down a road to get to the barrier islands where the shells are. Now, if you wanted to go to the Mississippi barrier islands and get some shells, you can take the Ship Island ferry, or you can go on your own private boat out to Cat Island, Ship Island, Horn Island, or etc. And you can go see some of the same shells that wash up because the currents are stronger and the waves are stronger, and there's nothing preventing them from washing it forward. So mine come from Florida mainly, some from Alabama, and then some other places. My parents went to Israel and brought me some shells back. I have some from the California coast, the South Carolina coast, etc. I have kind of a large collection. But I bring these to school and I talk to them about scientific illustration. Now, you have to draw from a realistic item to be a scientific illustrator, and you have to be exact with it. And a lot of times vocabulary has to go with it. There'll be a little line where you put some kind of vocabulary about what you're drawing. So let's take, for instance, one of the most popular things you can pick up is just some little shells like this. These little scallops. Okay, so we would draw one of these and we would label it a scallop. Here's another one. Here's a scallop. You can even you don't even have to go to the beach to find these. We have found these on the playground at Central Elementary School in Gulfport because we have sand in our playground. And so sometimes you can find scallops just anywhere that sand has been pumped in. So here's the scallop. Now, let me talk about this scallop. You find them in little halves like this, but it actually takes 2 of these to make a complete shell. And that is called a mollusk. 2 put together is called a mollusk. And they usually look like this, like a clam kind of shape. And the little creature would live inside there. And then when he dies, the 2 halves separate and they roll up on the beach. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about these 2 shapes. Oh, I have a picture I can show you to help explain it a little better. All right, you look right here, This is a skeleton that is inside our body. Right here, you see the skeleton. That keeps our body to have keeps us safe, gives us some structure, helps us move and bend and do different things, and that's our endoskeleton. Inside our skin is the endoskeleton. Well, shells, like the one in this picture, or like the scallops I was holding up, they have exoskeletons on the outside. So when I hold up this little creature right here, he lives on the inside with no bones, and inside has no bones, so he's gushy and mushy on the inside, and outside is his bone to help protect him. He has an exoskeleton. So that might be something we needed to add to our vocabulary, that this was an exoskeleton. Now, if you find a shell like this is called a Florida conch. It would be the same way. This is an exoskeleton, and the creature lived on the inside. So what does that look like, I wonder? Ooh, here you go. This is what the conch looks like as the creature lives inside the shell. And he actually grows the shell just like we grow our bones. When you're a baby, you have little bones, and as you get older, your bones grow with you. Well, his shell grows as long as he keeps growing. Now, if you look, he's soft on the inside. He doesn't have bones. He's more like jelly on the inside, and his bone is that outside shell. And then when he dies, that shell will wash up, and you'll pick it up, and you'll keep it if you think it's pretty, I bet. Now, sometimes people mistake these right here. So I like to trick my art students, because this right here is not a seashell or the inside of a seashell or the little creature that has made the seashell and lives there. This is a hermit crab who has been just like us. He's a scavenger, meaning he takes what he can find. And so this little crab was crawling along the sand or the bottom of the ocean, and he found an empty shell and just climbed in and made it his home. So he didn't make the shell. He only borrows it, and then as he grows too big, he walks on out of that one and gets another one. So when you find these along the beach, they're called hermit crabs. They did not make the shell that they live in. They just scavenged it and took it, and they'll probably shed it and get another one soon. So let's talk about this. So when you're along the beach, you can see these shells. You can find the prize of walking along the beach, a sand dollar. How pretty is that? And they're very delicate and breakable, and I think that's why people like them so much. If you're on the Florida or Alabama coast, this little jewel is a popular one. This is called an olive shell, and it's got that pretty shiny coat, and they roll in the surf. The surf is where the water and the land meet, and they kind of surf along. The water rolls up, and they roll. And so it's called an olive, and it's very pretty. And then we have, just the usual. You might find a little piece of coral that washes up. Looks like this. Little piece of coral might wash up. You might find some scallops that have some barnacles on it. That's what barnacles look like. They grow on top of the shell. You might even find some barnacles that are really colorful that I like to collect. Those are big like this. And then you might find occasionally this right here. Now this is like a little egg sac. This is an egg sac for a baby stingray that hatched out of here. And there's a little hole right there where you can see where he comes out. So he's like an eggshell for a baby stingray. And they might wash up, and they're really cool to hold on to. Now, if you find a shell that has a perfectly round hole, you see that? Let me see if I can get a better one. Has a perfectly round drilled hole. I loved finding these when I was a child because I would put a string around it and wear it as a necklace. But actually what happened is this little shell was sitting at the bottom of the ocean with both of its halves, just enjoying life, and this conch right here came up on top, drilled a hole through the shell, and ate him. Yes, he ate him. This Florida conch, he's a bad little boy. Yeah, and he ate the insides of this one, and then they wash up, and we pick them up as treasures along the seashore. So if you see one with a hole, that means he died by way of a bigger shell that drilled a hole and ate him. Now, let's talk about how we're going to draw these. So when you're drawing one of these, you would have to look with your eyes and try very carefully to draw every little edge and detail, and then label the different parts of it that you know. And so that's what we do in our classroom when we draw shells. We try to label all the different parts that we know. Now, some of y'all might be thinking, I really don't want to do that. I want to do something else with my shells, which you are more than welcome to. You can make a necklace. You can make an artwork. You can just paint them for fun and make them nice and colorful. So there are lots of things you can do with shells. But a scientific illustrator will take what they find and draw an exact replica of it, and then they can draw little lines and label it, and it gets printed in textbooks. Thank you for joining me today and learning about scientific illustration. And this summer, when you find a shell, if you go to the beach here or on the playground, try to look at it and see if it has a perfectly drilled hole, if it has these different lines to show how old it is, or what kind of shell it is. Take it home and see if you can draw it exactly like it is, just like a scientific illustrator does. All right, see you next time. Thanks for joining me. Have a good afternoon.